Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Sit down, everyone.
Got it.
Everyone except Don.
You might think I'm sitting down, but I'm actually sitting. Mr. President, members of Congress, Dr. Collins, Mary Jo Ellis Khan, and other distinguished guests, when I look at all the leaders in this room, I'm reminded of a story about a Chicago Bulls rookie named Stacey King. Mr. President, you'll remember that his claim to fame is that he scored 1 point the same night that Michael Jordan scored a record 69. When a reporter asked Stacey King what he thought about this historic evening, he replied, "I'll always remember this is the night that Michael Jordan and I combined for 70 points. That rookie knew that there is something much more important than our individual contributions, and that is what we can accomplish together. Because from researchers to advocates, from legislators to our National Action Plan on breast cancer, it is the people in this room who have brought us here today. And it is the people in this room who will bring us to where we need to go tomorrow in the fight against genetic discrimination. A fight made even more important as we make progress in the battle against breast cancer. Under the President's leadership, the National Institutes of Health is spending 76% more for breast cancer research than it did in 1993. And now, as we work to reform Medicare and to extend the life of the trust fund, the Senate and the House must pass a budget that includes Medicare coverage of co-payments and deductibles for older women who get mammography. Because of our sustained investments in science, we're traveling down a revolutionary road in genetic research, a road marked by both great promise and great ethical dilemma. Over the past 3 years, we've seen that great promise in the discovery of genes linked to hereditary breast cancer and many other diseases. And we took an important step towards meeting the ethical dilemmas of genetic research when the Kassebaum-Kennedy bill became the law of the land. But because every person has mistakes in their genetic code, and every disease, not just breast cancer, is partially rooted in genetics, clearly we must do more. And that's why, Mr. President, I'm proud today to give you our report, Health Insurance in the Age of Genetics, that tells us all about the risks and the rewards of genetic testing. For example, over 20% of people in families with a genetic disorder report that they or a family member have been refused health insurance on the basis of their genetic profile. And in a survey, over 85% of Americans say that they're worried that employers and insurance companies might have access to and use their genetic information. These numbers send us a very clear message. We must enact bipartisan legislation to stop genetic discrimination, and we must do it now. Together, we must make sure that no American is afraid to walk through the doors of their doctor's office for fear that their genetic secrets will be used to close the door to affordable health insurance. We must make sure that no life-saving cure or treatment is lost because families, fearing discrimination, refuse to participate in genetic research. And as genetic research continues to unlock the mysteries of human disease, we must make sure that the privacy rights of every American are respected and protected. That is the fight that my friend Congresswoman Louise Slaughter continues to lead. One of the most passionate supporters of women's health in Congress, especially in our battle against breast cancer, Congresswoman Slaughter is fighting hard to make sure that no American falls victim to discrimination, to genetic discrimination. She has been a conscience for this country. I'm pleased to introduce the Congresswoman from New York, Congresswoman Louise Slaughter.
To be here with all of you today, and Mr. President, I just wish my mother could see what fine company I keep in Washington. This is a wonderful day for me, as all of you in this room know, because we've all worked together to achieve this spot, that how important it is that we see this bill to its completion. And Mr. President and Secretary Shalala, I give you my great thanks because it has been a pleasure during the time of this administration to see the great advances that have been made in the areas of women's health in particular, but in health in general. Now, none of us have been born with perfect genes, present company accepted, Mr. President. And this is an issue that affects every American. And so I've been extremely interested in working this and got to know, I think, one of the most wonderful consummate scientists on earth, Dr. Francis Collins, who heads up the Human Genome Project. This is such a magnificent achievement that we're right on the cusp of finding out things about us that we never knew. And what a tragedy that as we begin to learn these wonderful things that we have to be afraid whether or not that knowledge is going to hurt us. We've written a very simple bill here. It basically says that because of your genetic makeup, the terms and the rates or conditions of your health insurance may not be changed. And it says also that your genetic information belongs to you, and that without your consent, no one can use it. It's as simple as that. There are three reasons why I think this is terribly important that we pass this legislation. First is a belief that this issue that does affect every citizen in this country, that it is critically important that the social policy maintain pace with the science. We've not often done that, but in this issue, I think it is extremely critical, and we've had an opportunity that we've not had before in a lot of scientific breakthroughs to try to take care of this first. The second is that I know that discrimination already exists. I know of a young woman who stood with us at a press conference who was the sole provider of health insurance for her family. And even though her mother and all of her maiden aunts had died of breast cancer, she was afraid to know whether she had that genetic disposition or not because she couldn't afford the thought of being left without health insurance, and nor could her family. I know of a woman who said to me just last week in my office, who was there for an entirely different subject, who said to me that major institutions, medical institutions in the United States, are given and had given to her the advice not to find out what her genetic makeup is because there were a number of young women in her family who might be affected adversely by the health insurance issue. Third, I think it's important, as a former microbiologist, I understand how important research is. And without question, this information, holding it close to the vest, never knowing, not being able to have access to the kind of preventive care that you need, not knowing anything about you, is also going to have a chilling effect on research. People are not going to want to be involved in research projects if they think it's going to cost them too dearly. And finding the gene, and I know Dr. Collins would say the same thing, is only the first step. The research now needs to go on into what are we going to do about it. And so it's critically important that nothing impede the path that Americans need to take to find out all of these answers. I am so happy, Mr. President. I don't have really words adequate to say to you how important your support is to this bill. We've got numbers of good supporters, I think 136 sponsors now in the House, and to say thank you to the 70 groups out here would certainly not be adequate. Without question, we wouldn't have even a quarter of those had you not worked as hard as you have to make sure that members of the House of Representatives have signed on and understand the importance of genetic non-discrimination. You know, this is the key to following this science and this new frontier of medicine. And I look forward to working with this administration and with the President's support to help make this future a reality. And I now have the very distinct pleasure of introducing Mary Jo Ellis-Kahn. She is a tireless activist in breast cancer. She's the co-founder and the past president of the Virginia Breast Cancer Coalition and is a member of the National Action Plan on Breast Cancer. She is well known in the halls of the Virginia State Capitol, where her persistent lobbying efforts yielded great results for breast cancer victims. And she and I have already discussed the numbers of the members of the Virginia delegation who are not yet on this bill, and I'm sure Mary Jo will take care of that before dark. I'm also particularly proud to note that when I introduced this bill last term, by the way, this was introduced in December of 1995, this is not a new piece of work, that Mary Jo was there at the press conference standing there beside me. And so it's with great pride and pleasure that I introduce to you Mary Jo Ellis Kahn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Slaughter. I'm here today representing the many women who, in this country, who have breast cancer, and the many families that have loved ones that are affected by this disease. It's on behalf of all those women and families that I represent today that I would like to thank Secretary Shalala, Congresswoman Slaughter, Francis Collins, and especially President Clinton for their leadership on this particular issue that means so very much to all of us. I'd also like to introduce my family on the front row. Breast cancer is always a family disease, but if you have it in multi-generations, it becomes a way of life. And I don't think that one person can tell that story, but an entire family can. So I'm glad they're here with me today. My mother, Dorothy Ellis, was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was only 39. She was young, active. She had just given birth a few months before to her 5th child. And I'm sure that we had good times after that, but what I remember is her being sick and her being in pain and her grieving over her impending death. Breast cancer, when it strikes a family, is a terrible struggle, both for the individual and for all of the people involved. After my mother died, my 3 sisters and I knew that we were high risk for breast cancer, but she was the only person in the family who was diagnosed at that time, so we also wanted to believe she'd be the last. In 1989, getting ready for my 40th birthday, I scheduled a mammogram, and I didn't really have to wait after they told me I needed a biopsy for the results. I knew at that moment that I was going to be living my mother's life. And sure enough, at 39, I was diagnosed as well. Judy at that time could feel a lump. She'd had the doctor examine her, and he said he couldn't feel it. Mammograms wouldn't pick it up. And they would have left her at that point in the wait and see until it grew larger, except for my diagnosis. And it did make her move faster. She did have a biopsy, and she too was diagnosed. Hers, in fact, was further along than mine had been. For the two of us, I think we were our own support group. For the extended family, we were an incredible crisis. Charlene, who is not here today because she lives too far away, was married, and she had 2 young children. And she and her husband didn't have a hard decision to make. As far as they were concerned, they simply couldn't wait to see if breast cancer would strike in their family. All they said was, we need her here to raise these boys. And it was an easy decision to have her healthy breast removed in preventive prophylactic surgery. For Lauren, who was 30, it was a harder decision, and she thought in the beginning that she could wait and see. But there were multiple inconclusive mammographies. There were numerous biopsies, every one of them with a worse path report than before. She had a radiologist and a surgeon who kept saying, we really can't tell if you have cancer. And she was in a quality of life mode where she said, I can't live like this. Nothing is worth this. And she too decided to have preventive surgery. In 1994, scientists did discover the first of several mutations in a gene called BRCA1. It was called the BRCA1 because it was the first breast cancer gene mutation. And soon after that, there was the ability to test for hereditary susceptibility for this disease. And thanks to the progress in cancer genetics research, women in our family situation could make better informed decisions than we were able to make in 1989. They do now have access to a test that can begin to give them information about how at risk they are, and they can better plan for their medical care. Unfortunately, our family is still struggling trying to make the decision to find out this valuable information. For if we get tested, we're very much afraid that we'll put the next generation of young women, young Ellises in our family, at risk for losing their health insurance. It is a risk that until now, my family simply was unwilling to take. I wish that all of you could meet them personally, because I'm not the least bit biased when I tell you about them. Amy and Michelle and Barbara, if you would stand up, this is my niece and 2 daughters. I want you to see their faces, because they are the reason we're here today. If it weren't for brilliant, compassionate, wise, caring, wonderful people, young women like these 3, who need to be valued, who need to get health insurance, who need to be able to fight a disease that may strike them, this legislation would not be necessary. But these 3 women are really very special. Amy is following in the footsteps of many Ellises before her and is becoming a teacher, and her specialty will be hard to teach children. And I can't tell you which will be which, but one of my daughters is going to be President of the United States, and the other one a Supreme Court Justice. So it was important that you got to see them today, remember their names. It would be a tragedy for our society to lose them. For long before they are able to reach their potential, they may have to fight a deadly disease. Everyone in this room, I know, hopes that genetics research will lead to a new era where prevention and treatment for breast cancer will lead us to the point that not only do we have to do away with preventive mastectomies, but all mastectomies. They should be relegated to the history books. But to reach these outcomes, families like mine need to be able to participate in medical genetics research. And so far, my family is too frightened to do so. Each person must decide for themselves if they want to be tested, if they want to learn the results of these tests, what they want to do with either positive or negative results. But those choices, difficult though they may be, should never be based on the fact that you're afraid you'll be discriminated against. Prevention of discrimination will allow the next generation of Ellises and thousands of others like us to use the benefits of genetics research to better plan our medical care. But even more importantly, it's so that young women in my family and other families can reach their potential and be guaranteed the right to pursue their life, unafraid that they will be uninsurable and unemployable. With access to good medical care, breast cancer does not mean a certain death. Early detection and proper treatment have enabled many of us, and many of us in this room, to live long, fulfilling, meaningful lives. But denying health insurance is the same as denying health care, and it will destine many young women to not only great suffering, but unnecessary premature death. It is a matter of life and death that this legislation pass for my children. And I think that most important, we have to remember, breast cancer is a terrible, horrible disease, but the people who have it are very, very valuable. The passage of comprehensive, protective federal legislation to prevent health insurers from using genetic information to discriminate against healthy young women is, in my opinion, the most significant moral determination of this century. Under the leadership of this administration, let us hope that our society can learn much, much more about what we inherit, how we inherit DNA, whether it is good or, just as importantly, if it's a little imperfect. All of it important. And that we take this knowledge and as a society, we use it to bind us together, not tear us apart. I think that our generation is very fortunate that in the time of great genetic successes, that we have a president who has the vision to both allow this research to move forward and to uncover the secrets of disease and so many things that it will help us with in the future. And at the same time, to have the willingness to make sure that this research only is used for the betterment of mankind. It is with heartfelt appreciation that I have the opportunity to introduce the President of the United States, Mr. Bill Clinton.
Thank you very much. You know, very often when I come into this room for an event like this, to stand up for a cause I believe in, by the time it's my turn to speak, there's nothing else to say. But that has never been more true than it is at this moment. Mary Jo, you were terrific, and we thank you. Thank you very much. Secretary Shalala, Congresswoman Slaughter, Dr. Collins, the head of our Genome Project, Susan Blumenthal, the head of the Women's Health Office at HHS. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I want to say a special word of thanks, too, to Congresswoman Louise Slaughter. Both our families have known losses, and hers very recently, and we appreciate her being here. I love to hear Louise Slaughter talk, you know, with her beautiful Southern accent. The first time I heard she was a congresswoman from New York, I thought it was a misstatement. And, from my point of view, she's the only member of Congress from New York who speaks without an accent, and I like that. The remarkable strides that we have seen in genetic research and testing are so important to every American family. Chances are every family represented in this room in our lifetime will have a child, a grandchild, a cousin, a niece, a nephew somehow benefited from the work of the Human Genome Project, which seemed nothing more than an intellectual dream just a few years ago. And one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that every American family has a chance to benefit from it. Secretary Shalala's report, which she has issued, it's a remarkable report, and I commend it to all of you, makes it clear that the scope of this era of discovery is truly astonishing. We are literally unlocking the mysteries of the human body, finding new and unprecedented ways of discovering not only the propensity for it to break down in certain ways or lead to certain forms of disease or human behavior, but also ways to prevent the worst consequences of our genetic structure. And as with every kind of decision like this, there's always the possibility that what we learn can not only be used, but can be misused. And in all of this era of scientific discovery, there's probably no greater promise for use or for misuse than in the era of genetic testing. Used in the right way, obviously, it has the chances to save millions of lives and revolutionize healthcare. And I'm proud of our aggressive support for the Human Genome Project. But it's also clear that it is wrong for insurance companies to use genetic information to deny coverage. It's happened before, you know. It happened in the 1970s with some African Americans who carried sickle cell anemia. And it can happen in many other ways. An enormous percentage of American women get breast cancer at some time during their lives. Enormous percentage of American men get prostate cancer at some time during their lives. There are other kinds of medical problems that occur with increasing frequency and that we'll see more and more as we grow older as a population. And now we see the consequences already of this kind of discrimination. It's wrong when someone avoids taking a test that could save a life just because they're so afraid that the genetic information will be used against them. And too many women today fear that that will happen when they decide to test or to not be tested to see if they carry the gene for breast cancer. This kind of discrimination is really, it's more than wrong, it's a life-threatening abuse of a potentially life-saving discovery. And I can't help commenting that in the United States, it is a direct consequence of the fact that we are the only advanced country in the world that has chosen to finance the health care of our citizens through a private insurance system that is completely optional and does not cover everyone. And I tried to... So that, to be fair, the insurance companies themselves face some dilemmas that can only be fixed by the law, by a restatement of the public interest, so that none are treated differently from others if they make the decision to do what is morally right. And I think that's important to point out. I tried to fix it once and took a lot of criticism, but I'm not ashamed that I did. If I could fix it tomorrow, I'd fix it tomorrow, because this is not right. But we have done what we could to try to step by step change this structure. A year ago, we took the first step when Congress passed and I signed the Kennedy-Casaubon bill, which prohibits group health plans from using genetic information to deny coverage. And today, my administration is sending legislation to Congress that will ban all health plans, group and individual, from denying coverage or from raising premiums on the basis of genetic tests. It will prohibit all health plans from disclosing genetic information that could be misused by other insurers. But it will protect researchers' ability to make the best use of this vitally important tool. It builds on the solid foundation of Congresswoman Slaughter and Senator Olympia Snow's bill. And I'm pleased to say that Senator Frist from Tennessee and Senator Jeffers from Vermont have announced that they will share our commitment and that they will work with us to pass bipartisan legislation to ban discrimination based on genetic tests. This is an example of the step-by-step approach we are now taking that I will not be satisfied with until we have made sure that every American family has the health care they need to thrive. We've already ensured that a job change or an illness in the family doesn't mean automatically losing your health insurance. We made it easier for self-employed people to buy health insurance for their families. The balanced budget agreement I have reached with the leaders of Congress that was voted for in its outline by overwhelming majorities in both parties in both houses will extend care to millions and millions of uninsured children. It will ensure, as Secretary Shalala said, that more older women can have mammograms. It will protect Medicare and Medicaid. But what we're here today to say is something very simple and yet profound. We cannot afford to let our progress, either in science or in extending health care to the American people, to be underlined by the misuse of what is a miracle of genetic testing. Americans should never have to choose between saving their health insurance and taking tests that could save their lives. With these efforts, we will ensure at least that no American ever has to make that choice again. Thank you very much.